Welcome back to another episode of Uncut Gems. At Uncut Gems, as you know, we explore the cutting-edge innovations of visionary minds shaping the future of our crypto ecosystem. And today we are diving super deep into the world of rollups and layer 2 solutions with a project that is making some noise in the space, which is Zircuit. Therefore, we are thrilled to have one of the co-founders, Martin Derka, joining us today. Martin is basically one of the creative minds behind Zircuit, a project that is kind of trying to redefine what is possible at the intersection of AI, zero-knowledge proofs, and also rollup technology. With his unique background spanning from computer science, AI, and blockchain, Martin also brings a fresh perspective to the challenges of scaling and efficiency within our industry. And with that, Martin, it's a pleasure to have you on Uncut Gems, and welcome.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dominic. I'm very happy to be here.
Nice. So to kick things off, it's kind of a stable. Meanwhile, let's explore your journey to founding Zircuit. Maybe could you briefly walk us through your background and also the key experience maybe and insights, particularly also from your time at QuantStamp that led you to found Zircuit?
Yeah, awesome. So as you mentioned, I'm a co-founder and technical lead at Zircuit. I have a pretty rich history in the blockchain industry. I've been working in blockchain since 2017, 2018. For a very long time, I was a smart contract auditor at QuantStamp, a cybersecurity company that specializes in auditing blockchain projects. For this long time of being at QuantStamp, I was sort of wondering, could blockchains do a little bit more for the users, right? Because the current paradigm is that you think about security once. You develop your project, you hope that you're following the good engineering practices and all that. And when you are done prior to deployment, you submit your project for an audit, right? Then the auditors do their work. But if something gets missed, then it's totally possible that you end up deploying a project that has some hidden vulnerabilities in them. And those vulnerabilities would eventually get exploited. If there is an attack vector, at some point, somebody's going to notice it and it is going to be exploited. So for this whole time, myself and some other people, we were wondering, could we do something more? Could we build a blockchain that does something more for the users, that doesn't just, defer security to the developers? We were using, a lot of intelligent tooling for discovering these vulnerabilities and code defects in general. And we were kind of thinking about a way of engaging the blockchain on an active level that, it could potentially observe that a hack is happening and do something about it, right? And this was also roughly the year of rollups coming up, both optimistic and zero knowledge. And so we were wondering about, hey, could we actually build such a blockchain in the form of a rollup? And those would be the origins of Zircuit. So Zircuit is fully separated now from QuantStamp. We started developing Zircuit roughly 2 years ago. Last year at DevConnect of 2023 in Istanbul, we launched Zircuit Testnet. This July and August, we launched Zircuit Mainnet. I said 2 dates because, we actually launched Zircuit Mainnet in July, but we made it only available to partners so that they can set up their projects, set up the front ends, deploy their smart contracts and so on. As of the beginning of August, we made it available to the general public. So as I said, Zircuit is a zero-knowledge rollup where we enhance the sequencer with some added capabilities of detecting hacks and transactions that are executing hacks before they happen. And if we detect that a transaction is a hack, we freeze it. We put it in so-called quarantine where it can undergo further inspection and can be handled accordingly.
Okay, nice. Thanks for the insights and the comprehensive answer there. Before we dive into these more serious topics, like you outlined, the SLS and so forth, and what makes Zircuit actually unique in how you approach the scaling landscape, I would like to start with something fun because I'm really an avid fan of the cat theme. I think they are really adorable, and I was wondering, I know like NFTs lost some steam, but it's also somewhat I don't know, very natural that maybe Circuit follows up with a cat-themed NFT kind of collection. Is that something that you are looking in, or not so much?
So Zircuit is a blockchain. We are primarily developing a blockchain, you know. So dropping NFTs, this is not in the core line of business. At the same time, yes, we do consider cats insanely cute. So I am not gonna say that this is never gonna happen, but currently it's not on the roadmap.
Okay, I would cheer for it, to be honest. But let's
Me too.
dive in. Let's dive into Circuit's tech stack. So, as we know, the rollup-centric mode roadmap is getting traction. I just saw on L2Beat just a couple minutes ago that we had another all-time high when it comes to activity. Obviously, like more and more now at times also stems from layer 3. But even if you just exclude layer 3s, even layer 2s, vanilla layer 2s, like basically also had an all-time high, which is really impressive. So my point is basically, we are currently facing a landscape that is pretty crowded with layer 2 solutions. But Circuit somewhat stands out with a truly unique approach, as you kind of sketched already. And therefore, without further ado, I would like to dive somewhat into the weeds and into the tech stack of Circuit. And maybe you could give us an overview. It doesn't have to be too tech heavy, but an overview of the key components that make up Circuit's tech stack. And by that, I mean, maybe you could outline like how does your data availability solution look like basically these different pillars. How do you look at settlement? How is your proving system looking like? For instance, I also know you're using Ethereum's Go client. You use Halo 2 proof system, and I also think you use Optimism Bedrock, the current iteration of the OP stack. But for now, let's focus on these things and exclude the most intriguing difference, which comes at the sequencing level. Let's talk about that later, but let's start with the things I outlined.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. So, try to imagine that you're trying to build a rollup, right? You will need a lot of things. You will need something that will form your execution layer. That will be your layer 2 blockchain. So this is, where we use L2 Geth in the form or in some mildly adjusted form as it is contained in Optimism Bedrock. Then you will need some sequencing components. You will need something that once in a while takes a look at the blockchain, what transactions arrive, and records it onto the data availability layer. That in the terminology of Optimism Bedrock, we call the batcher. And then because you're a rollup, at some point you will want to take the state root of your blockchain and you will want to submit it into smart contracts on an L1. And that is carried out by the service that we call the proposer. Now, all these things, as you mentioned, all these things are, very conveniently sort of available in the framework that is known under the name Optimism Bedrock. So what we did in Zircuit is we started with Optimism Bedrock and we started adjusting these services in the way that we needed them so that they can work with a zero knowledge world, because Optimism Bedrock by name, is very clearly optimistic, right? So we ripped out everything out of it that resembles optimistic rollups and we replaced it with zero knowledge machinery. Now, so we have that machinery that is the prover. So whenever we, have some blocks that are produced onto an L2, we submit them to a service that produces zero knowledge proofs for them. That has to be carried out by some kind of zero knowledge prover. We are using the circuits, as you mentioned, that were started by the Privacy and Security Exploration Group, so PSC in shorthand. However, those are also, adjusted to the purposes that we need them to. That also influences the proving architecture that we have. So, with every single block, we actually first generate 8 smaller proofs, 8 inner proofs that allow some parallelism in the work because those proofs use inputs that purely depend on blocks.
Hmm.
So we are actually able to run these provers in parallel. And then because, if we were to submit all those proofs, every single block has 8 of them to a smart contract and verify them on an L1, that would be pretty expensive, right? So we actually have a secondary step, which includes compression in the form of an aggregation of these proofs. So we aggregate these proofs, which gives us a single proof that simultaneously proves multiple blocks. And that's what we submit to a smart contract, which is equipped with the respective verifier that matches the prover. Then you were asking about the data availability layer. So we actually use the EIP 4844. So our batcher takes the batches of transactions that arrived to our blockchain and submits them into blobs on Ethereum mainnet. And then there is that one magical component, which we should talk about a little bit later. And that's what we call internally an oracle, right? So on a regular rollup, both optimistic and zero knowledge, you have a sequencer whose main purpose is to organize transactions into blocks.
Yeah.
It receives those transactions whenever it has enough of them, it just produces a block, right? And based on the gas auction and stuff like that. So in our particular case, this happens exactly the same with one caveat. With every single transaction, before we put it into a block, we ask that one service that we call an oracle. That's where AI comes in. And we ask it one simple question. Hey, is this transaction malicious? Is it going to damage some users on our blockchain? And if the answer is yes, then the transaction is not going to make it into the next available block and it is quarantined. We put a flag on it, which means, hey, guest, please ignore this transaction for the
Hmm.
time being when producing blocks. And if the answer is no, this transaction is absolutely normal, then nothing changes. The transaction goes into a block that is next available. So that's the rough architecture that we use.
Nice. So there are some, let's say, very exciting Legos in there. Maybe the proof aggregation nicely blends into something that I'm keen to see. Maybe you can give us also a sense of like what kind of throughput does this parallelization and proof aggregation allow you to bring with Circuit. Also, maybe you have some ballpark estimates of when we talk about cost or latency, because I guess like Circuit should be capable of being, let's say, at least pretty competitive when it comes to throughput, I guess, with these kind of innovations. Is that correct?
Yes, this is our goal, but I will be fully open in here. We are not there yet. So, if you were following Twitter, recently some people were calling out that we are actually not proving every single block. And this is with the current state of Zircon mainnet absolutely correct. So, what our prover currently does is that it every once in a while wakes up and it proves a few blocks at a time. It produces those inner proofs and it aggregates them accordingly and submits them into a verifier. It is absolutely correct that these days, producing zero knowledge proofs is a very computationally intensive task.
Yeah.
And with Zircuit, I mean, we are a very young project. We have, started the entire journey 2 years ago. We had multiple choices to make along the way. And one of them was, well, are we going to complete all the optimizations and are we going to finish the entire proof system to the extent that we would like to, essentially support one of the fastest rollups that exist in the industry
Yep.
before we release mainnet or not? And so what we actually did is we used a hybrid mode where at this point we prove a few blocks and then whatever happened in the meantime, our blocks are produced every 2 seconds. It is absolutely unrealistic with the current technology to actually prove a zero knowledge EVM type of transition within 2 seconds, right? You would actually need many, 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 many machines. So what we have chosen is to embed a little bit of a proof of authority component into the current mainnet version, where after our computed proof, we just take a look at what happened at blockchain. We roll it up, we equip it with an authorized signature, say, okay, this happened in the meantime, the finality of the network can proceed and can be achieved, and then we start computing the next proof. So if you take a look, we call this principle template proofs. So if you actually take a look at some block explorer, you will be able to see that the transactions that we are submitting to the verifier have zero knowledge proof, some template proof, some zero knowledge proof, some template proof, and so on. Now, as we progress with our optimizations and as we complete the prover to the way we would like it to be completed, now I'm hinting a little bit at the roadmap. We would like to do that by the end of this year. These templated proofs are going to slowly go away. So,
Okay.
at that point, the rollup will be a complete zero knowledge rollup, and it will be producing blocks every 2 seconds. And every block we are currently targeting will fit something between 32 and 100 transactions. There is, large scale. I'm giving a huge range, right? 32 to 100. But that, is kind of dependent on how exactly those optimizations of the prover are going to pan out.
Okay, very cool. Thanks for the insights there. And obviously, I understand that as I understand, like these templates proof are they work, but it's also just an interim solution. It's just for now getting on track, getting started, and it allows you probably to iterate faster into mainnet, which is coming. As I understand.
It has multiple purposes, right? Because when you are launching a blockchain or a rollup, it's not about just building the technology. You actually have a lot of work. You have to build a community. You have to enable the developers. You actually, have a lot of parties to work with, right?
Yeah.
And so either you can finish all that work on your provers and on the technology first and defer everything for after, but then you will have a huge gap in adoption and in traction, and you essentially will have been closing the gates for everybody for unnecessarily too long. So, that's why we chose this particular approach, so that when we are absolutely feature complete, there is already a community, there are already projects that exist on the network, and it's just generally ready for everybody who would like to use it, and if you have a little bit of trust, you can use it right away.
Yeah, interesting. I think another important aspect could also be that, there's so much stuff happening within that like not too little CK space anymore. And therefore you might have a kind of, it might be beneficial if you do not commit too early, let's say, because it's also unclear like what is happening on the development front. But let's dive a little bit into this, into the magic sauce of Zircuit, which is AI at the sequencing level. So kind of more generically, we have these two technology megatrends this decade, which is crypto and AI, which is super, that are both happening in tandem currently. And it's like an exciting time to be alive in my view. As you know, AI took the world by storm. I use it frequently, meanwhile, in my private and professional life. The models became super powerful. And now I feel like these LLMs really provide like tangible benefits. And I found it really interesting that it is like somehow randomly at the same time, crypto somewhat complements this AI movement in a window to me of fortunate timing to provide kind of a trust layer to AI technology that kind of seeks trust. So it's cool to see more and more projects aiming at this or looking at this intersection of AI and crypto. And now also Zircuit is one of them. And maybe it's like a little bit similar to an AI agent. Maybe you can enlighten us here. So basically one of Zircuit's, as you mentioned before, most exciting features is basically implementing or integrating some form of AI at the sequencer level. basically to bootstrap more security for the user or customer. Alongside, as I understand, you coined this broader concept that you call sequencer level security, or SLS. And maybe from your view, please walk us through some of the implementation details. How does it work in practice? How exactly do you identify malicious transactions? Like which models do you use? How do you train them? How does it work? Maybe as a kind of ELIs.
Yep.
And also, maybe one more question that came up for me is like, what implications does it have on conventional mechanisms such as an escape hatch? Maybe you can just elaborate on these different things.
Absolutely. So I think that in Zircuit, we found the perfect balance between using both blockchain and AI at the same time. When we come to sequencing, I subscribe to the notion that sequencing should be to a great extent deterministic, right? So when I am a user and when I submit a transaction, I should be able to make some expectations about whether this transaction will be included, or when this transaction will be included and where it will be sitting in the sequence. So we actually didn't touch the inclusion mechanism at all. It's absolutely equivalent to EIP 1559 from Ethereum in terms of the gas auction. So we are receiving transactions into the mempool. We have a fixed block space. If there needs to be made a decision, which transaction will be included over another one and in which order, this is exactly equivalent to the Ethereum. Then we wanted to do that analysis on transactions and say, hey, are these transactions malicious or not, right? This is where AI comes in. So when you think about this question in general, it's actually a very hard problem. If I give you a transaction and say, hey, is this a transaction, that is hacking something or not? Please decide for me. You will sort of have a very rough time, right? What you will have to do is you will have to simulate the transaction. You will have to take a look at the asset movement and what it performs on the blockchain. And based on the value of these assets and based on what you consider right versus not right, you will say, oh, this transaction is okay. Or you may say, no, this transaction is not okay. Or you may say, this transaction is okay, but it is some kind of an arbitrage. But in general, the question actually doesn't have a clear answer, right?
Yeah.
So this is where we decided that AI actually has a lot of benefit, because what we can do is we can take a look at the history of transactions on all the possible EVM compatible chains that are out there that follow the same transaction and execution model, right? And we can take a look at the history of transactions. And very clearly, there are some transactions in the past that the communities do not like, that are generally, consensually considered to be hacks, right? So this is where we said, yes, AI actually has a tremendous potential. And this also sort of answers this question, what models do we use and how we train them, right? So we have taken the history of transactions on roughly 22 EVM compatible chains. Transactions from approximately those past 2 years. That number exceeds 4.5 billion transactions. So it's a very, very, very large data set. And those are the transactions that actually go into training the model that is deciding whether a given transaction that is given to it is malicious or not. So when we receive a transaction, the transaction gets essentially simulated. We obtain an execution trace for it, in the GEF meaning. That trace, together with the transaction, goes into the artificial intelligence model. And the artificial intelligence model makes a decision. It's actually even a little bit smarter. It doesn't just say, yes, this is malicious. No, this is not malicious. It even is able to give us some extra data and extra kind of opinions about the transaction. So it's even able to say, hey, this transaction is here and is going to cause damage of what I assume to be $100,000 or something like that, or, related to some other blockchain native asset. So that is actually very, very powerful. The backtests show that the accuracy of these models is pretty good. The false negative rate is roughly 0.5%, and the false positive rate is 0.1 to 0.3%, depending on what chain you are actually looking at. And that is without knowing what protocols the particular transaction should be transacting with, right? Or how those protocols internally work. When we know that, this transaction is going to smart contracts from, for example, Compound or, for example, Uniswap, we are actually able to achieve even much larger accuracy just by knowing the internals and, how the typical flow of the logic within those protocols goes. So, those are the models. The other thing that shows is that this basically, or inclusion of such technology, basically does not impact regular users. So if you imagine a transaction from a regular user, as sort of a graph of calls between smart contracts, you have some wallet, some externally owned account, and it makes a call to some protocol, let's say Compound for lack of better words. The Compound smart contract makes a call to a different smart contract, probably a token smart contract if you are executing a deposit. And then tokens move from that smart contract into Compound and you receive some receipt tokens. It's a very simple interaction. There are a few hops in there. There are no cycles, no loops, nothing like that. If you are transferring ERC20 tokens, it's even simpler. You are making a call to a single smart contract saying, hey, please, smart contract, update some balances. It's just like a sort of one-way path. When you look at hacks that happen in DeFi, they're actually very complicated because they usually manipulate markets. So you start somewhere, usually by taking a flash loan of something of this sort that transfers a lot of assets to the smart contract that you called initially and passes back an execution by making a callback. Then you interact with a different protocol. That would be the protocol that you are probably going to manipulate the markets on. Then you are going to interact with the protocol that you are actually going to exploit. Then you are going to back into, interact with the protocol that you have manipulated to even further increase the level of manipulation. And because usually you want to maximize your damage, you sort of repeat that as many times as you can in a single transaction because, the number of transactions that you can execute before anybody notices sort of matters because you're always at a risk that somebody's going to, find it, front run you, brick you, pause the protocol, and so on, right? So like you are trying to actually make it, as efficient as you can if you're a hacker. And that results in transactions that are extremely complicated. So if you look at this technology from the end user perspective, you essentially have nearly zero chance that your transaction would be falsely accused of being malicious. The largest, chance that happening is kind of impacting some arbitrage bots that are detecting arbitrage opportunities over multiple protocols because those transactions might be somewhat resemblant. But that's about it.
Nice. That sounds pretty exciting already. Especially, I like the fact that your model is trained on a very huge chunk and substantial amount of data. That's cool. Maybe two follow-up questions here. Very simply, what transactions exactly do you consider malicious? And then the second question would be, I like that you provided some data on test cases. It's clear what happens if it if we have a false negative case, then the malicious transaction just goes through. But What if it misflags sound transactions exactly? What happens if my sound transaction basically comes into quarantine? Like, is it stuck there forever? Does it get out at some point? Like we know it from the Outlook kind of services, get it out of quarantine or something like that?
Yeah.
Like maybe you can highlight that a little bit.
So what transaction, that was the first question. What
Mm.
transactions do we consider hacks, right? So this is exactly the decision that we like to defer to the AI models
Okay,
because
fair.
we don't want to deal with this decision. Um, so this is the first level of defense. But of course, at some point we do have to deal with this decision because, as you said, there can be false positives, right? There can be
Yeah.
transactions that are considered malicious, but in fact they are not malicious, and therefore they are quarantined. So, truth to be told, these transactions actually have to be investigated, right? Because even if it is a true positive, it means that somewhere on your blockchain, there is a protocol that is vulnerable and that somebody has discovered that vulnerability and attempted to execute a hack. And you
Hmm.
probably, as the protocol operator would want to know about that, right?
Hmm.
So, therefore, we actually continuously review the quarantine. And if we find transactions that were quarantined and we believe that they shouldn't be quarantined because they are not hacked, so we actually
Hmm.
take a look at them with a naked eye, we can release them from the quarantine. As I said, on the technical level, the implementation means, hey, this transaction has a flag that it should not be included into a block. We can always override this flag. So, what
Okay.
some administrators on our end have is, special, let's say, Ethereum account, special private key, and then they can sign an order to release a transaction from the
Mm.
quarantine because, they believe that this transaction is actually okay upon that investigation. It provides us
I
with
see.
full accountability and, it can work. Now, obviously, this can take some time, right? You probably cannot expect that, within 30 seconds or 15 seconds, your transaction will be reviewed by somebody if it is accused of being malicious. So
Mm.
you, as the user, also have an option to cancel this transaction, to say, hey, you know
Ah,
what, like,
yeah, that's
dear
good.
Zircuit, you didn't want to execute it. You know what? I will not trust you anymore, right? Maybe I will
Mm.
not want to transact on your chain anymore. That's, absolutely fair at that point. But, please cancel my transaction that I wanted to do. I'm actually going to exit. Um, and so you submit this transaction. It's the typical transactions that wallets would submit for you when you're canceling a transaction on blockchain. So it's going to be a transaction that transfers 0 Ether from your wallet to your wallet with higher gas and the same nonce, compared to the transaction that was falsely quarantined.
Ah, okay, that's nice. Because I was just thinking, because it might be an unpleasant surprise if, like, 3 days later, my transaction goes through while I repeated it somewhere else or already. So,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe as a like, I just wanted to add to like which transactions do you consider malicious? I was more referring to like when you train the model within the data set, don't you have to label transactions as malicious? In
Yes,
order to,
absolutely.
yeah, that's what I meant. Like, what kind of transactions do you pick as malicious there?
Uh, you go through media and say, hey, everybody tweeted about this. This was, covered on all the mainstream media.
Okay.
Essentially, we go by the community consensus in here. If,
Ah, fair, yeah. There are
yeah.
also
So
super
if,
nice websites that perfectly track basically all
yes,
scams and
yes,
so forth, yeah. And maybe
yes, yes, exactly.
on this kind of power that you have on releasing stuff from the quarantine, um, is that something that you're looking into make it more decentralized? Maybe at some point validators do that or some kind of decision committee, I don't know, instead of like having it as a, I mean, this is a powerful kind of thing to have, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely spot on. You are absolutely correct. The way how I describe the mechanism, you essentially, sign an executive order that something should be released from the quarantine. it is ready for that. It is ready for further decentralization and multiple parties being able to make these decisions. The point is, this technology is new. We are the only blockchain out there that currently does that.
Yeah.
We have just enabled these oracles on Zircuit. And the reality is that nobody, except for us during internal testing, attempted a hack on Zircuit just yet, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So once we actually see, what the reality is, what the behavior of users of Zircuit is, what
Yeah.
how prominent this problem is, how often it actually occurs, that's we will be making the decisions about further decentralizations of this particular mechanic. As you said, it is a pretty powerful, tool to have.
Yeah.
We now very much understand that if we, quarantine a hack and then release that hack, then we are going to ruin the trust in ourselves, right? So
For
we
sure.
like to be sort of the creators of our own future. If we are
Mm.
ever going to do that, we will know that we screwed up and we will be, right to blame for that. Once we have a little bit insights and a little bit more experience with this particular activity, then that's the moment when we can start considering decentralization and having other parties weighing in and potentially employing the community and other security experts and so on.
Nice. Glad to hear. Maybe we could also shine some light on, I mean, maybe kind of preventing malicious transactions is just the tip of the iceberg of having AI within the sequencer set. Is there some other stuff that we might open up by having such a powerful tool within the sequencer set? I'm thinking about, the Argent wallet, these smart wallets, they have like guardians, kind of. Maybe can AI be also a guardian for me as a circuit user, potentially saying, hey, do you really want to make that transaction if somebody, I don't know why, but gets to my private keys or something like that? Is that something that might be on your roadmap, or maybe other stuff? I don't know. I'm just brainstorming.
Yeah, absolutely. You are correct. The AI can always make an opinion, right? And we now opened the opportunity to sort of integrate any kind of AI-based or other-based engines into the sequencer. So if it shows that there is a need to sort of apply AI and kind of detect transactions that are true outliers, it's like, hey, this person usually doesn't perform, transfers that drain all the possible assets from their wallet, or this
Mm.
person usually, doesn't transfer all NFTs out of this wallet into a
Yeah,
different one, right? Or if we actually know that the target address is a known scam address, phishing address, right? Those are
very
all
cool.
the possible detections that you can be performing. And
Yeah,
actually, when it comes to phishing and scams, this is something that we are actively working on. There are multiple lists and multiple databases, right, of phishing addresses and scams. Even if you go on Etherscan, you
yeah,
will see that there are certain addresses that are annotated as like, hey, this was part of a hack somewhere, right? So
nice.
this is something that very clearly can be employed as well. And then, again, if you want it, right, you can have a secondary layer of AI saying, hey, this person attempted this transfer like multiple times within the span of multiple days, or co-signed this, different transaction.
Yeah, yeah,
We should probably let it through. So the opportunities over there are absolutely, absolutely endless. And
that's
we are
cool.
working on some, but the core features are still revolving around the detection of malicious transactions.
Yeah, fair. I was also just thinking maybe a low-hanging fruit in that regard are also like these, I think they are called dusting attacks, where you get, where somebody sends you something with a similar address, right, that you used before. I mean, this, for instance, should be like rather easily detectable, I feel.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. That
yeah,
that
you
is
have a,
also easily that is
yeah,
also easily detectable. Again, I will, you always have to think about what if the users actually really wanted to do that,
For
right? What
sure.
will be the mechanic that will in the end not be preventative? But
Yeah,
yes, when you say dusting attack, it means that you are transferring ETH from one address to another address. Something notices, generates an address that has the very same first characters, the very same
exactly.
last characters,
Mm.
then it is hoping that you will grab that address by copying it from a block explorer that just like truncates the middle, right?
It's a
And that you
thing.
will,
Yeah,
yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing.
it's
I also know
happening.
people. Yeah, I also know people who lost some money to those.
Yeah,
So
very
yeah, it's
nice.
happening very widespread.
Yeah, yeah, cool. So you have a blank canvas, and I'm excited about everything that you come up with. It's a cool field to explore. And maybe I thought about like this SLS transaction flow, and I know MEV. It's always kind of an elephant in the room, and many current solutions basically mostly rest on centralized sequences, and they usually use this kind of first come first serve basis for transaction ordering. And I also know, observing the space, this is kind of somewhat changing recently. For instance, with Arbitrum's time boost now, because MEV kind of mirrors this potential source of more revenue or revenue at all for rollups via EG auctions, for instance. So would you give us a rundown on MEV and Zircuit? Like, is there something changing with this Oracle also playing around when it comes to transaction ordering, so quarantine? And also, maybe is there any potential attack surface when it comes to MEV and this kind of additional player in your transaction flow?
So the answer is actually no, not much is changing. If anything is changing, it is actually changing to the better. So, when you want to exploit MEV, you actually have to have some level of control of like, how the block is actually formed, right? So, you need to be able to, for example, front run a transaction or so. Uh, and you can attempt it. It, may or may not be successful unless you have some way of making a deal with the entity that is forming the block. That can be the block proposer, or that can be, some service that directly exposes APIs for you for that. Or, it can be the blockchain itself, right? Exploiting the MEV opportunities that they have detected and inserting transactions into blocks. So we at Zircuit, we actually have no such intentions. We are not going to actively exploit MEV and get some revenue or benefit out of that. We do not think that that would be a nice thing to do to our community, so we are not going to do it ourselves. Now, we actually operate a centralized sequencer, so we are the entity that is forming blocks. And subscribing to this particular philosophy, we also will not be exposing any APIs or making any external deals with anybody else that would allow them to exploit MEV on Zircuit. Because again, we do not think that this is a nice thing to do to our community. On top of that, our block time is pretty quick, right? 2 seconds per block. And that should actually provide ample block space for all the transactions to be included by a very, very, very short time frame. It is a little bit challenging on our end to make that happen, but it also poses challenges to, the external parties that would like to do something like front running or MEV exploitation, because they suddenly have only 2 seconds to actually, take a look at these opportunities and quickly submit a transaction that will actually make it into the block before, some other transaction, for example, executes a Uniswap trade, right? So that actually limits this opportunity even further. Yeah, so if anything is changing, it's just going to change to better.
Oh, nice. I'm glad to hear that. That's a very cool kind of dynamic. So overall, as we outlined, it's also, like in my view, frankly, it's really an exciting approach to enhancing blockchain security, having this AI within the sequencer set. And it also kind of opens new avenues for research, as we just outlined. On the flip side, however, there are a lot of controversies around like centralized sequencers first, and then even like putting AI on top. So the use of AI in such a critical component raises some interesting and also mostly polarizing questions. I want to quote something from your recent blog post. I don't know how it was titled, but you quote unquote, unlike in other blockchains, it scrutinizes every transaction before it places it into a block. It searches for transactions that exploit protocols and cause harm. Instead of including these transactions into blocks, it places them into quarantine. Somewhat, like don't get me wrong, but this also kind of screams censorship to me. How do you address some concerns that are swirling outside about centralization or potential manipulation in AI-driven sequencing? What about ethical questions regarding model bias, for example? Just basically all the questions that we know from AI that center around all of these, like let's say, controversial questions. Like, how do you strike the balance between security, performance, and decentralization? I would love to hear some kind of context on that matter, because it's really important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we subscribe to the notion that rollups are here to bring new features to Ethereum. They are here primarily to scale, right? But not every single rollup will be able to be, just exactly Ethereum as you like it and survive at the same time. We started the whole conversation by saying, hey, there is a number of rollups. Maybe the space is a little bit oversaturated and we are doing something differently and we are doing something, special. So yes, this is it. You can call it censorship if you want to. The reality is that the communities and the users will in the end decide if what we are doing is good for them and if they like it or if they do not like it, right? If they do not like it, we will die as a service, as a bad actor, and it is going to be absolutely fair. So yes, you did point at topics that definitely can be a concern. Again, if we permanently censor transactions that shouldn't be censored, Zircuit will be a dead project. So,
For sure, yeah.
I can say it's not going to happen.
Nice, thank you. Also, maybe a follow-up question here. Are there some plans to, at some point, decentralize the sequencer set? I mean, in my view, it's really cool. We know rollups get a lot of traction. There's activity going on. They now scale Ethereum. There are so many projects, let's say Espresso Systems or Astria, that look deep into sequencer decentralization. Then there are other upcoming projects like Mega Eve, which come up with this chunky sequencer, which is super powerful. It makes sense. And then Zircuit, which kind of comes up with this other new and very exciting approach. But in the end, I would love to see, like, do you have ambitions to basically at some point decentralize this whole thing, or why is it not even feasible? I don't know.
So I will do a little sandwich in here. I will say, yes, it is feasible, but I will get back to it, right? Because I want to react to what you said. Yes, it makes sense to, decentralize our sequencers. So, when you look at the general idea of rollups, the general idea of rollups is to create networks that scale Ethereum by removing the necessity to form consensus and defer that consensus back to Ethereum, right? Now, when you say, okay, fine, we've removed the necessity to form consensus, and we should decentralize, we add back the necessity to form consensus. So, yes, it makes sense, but it's also a little bit weird, right? And it's definitely a hard problem. So that's one thing. Is it even feasible or possible to decentralize our sequencer? And are we gonna do that? The answer is yes and yes and yes. The question is when we are going to do that. So again, the fact that we are running currently centralized sequencer, it provides us with a tremendous optionality and opportunity to iterate on it. You asked in the previous question, what if there is a model bias that will be censoring certain transactions? Well, because my sequencer is centralized, I can just turn it off. The model can be gone just like that. So these things, they are very important for us. We can actually fine tune, we can deal with performance issues, we can actually do a lot of stuff in a very short amount of time. If we end up not doing it well, then same thing as before, people are just not going to be using Zircuit because we are going to be doing bad sequencing, right? So for the time being, we are actually going to retain our centralized sequencing model for the ability to iterate on it quickly. Once we are sort of happy with its stability, with its performance, with the performance of the sequencer level security features that we have, we will approach the decentralization topics. Now, you mentioned a number of projects that are actually researching decentralized sequencers. The reality is decentralized sequencing is, not ready for adoption yet. That they are, really still researching, right? So we are going to, for the time being, focus on actually bringing the features that we want to bring to the world to some level of maturity. What is really important for us at this point is that we do have a pretty decent idea of how we would be able to decentralize these features. So, we are not closing the door on this opportunity in the future. And once we are happy with that, we are going to approach the decentralization questions. And yes, at some point we're going to do it, but when exactly, I cannot tell at this moment.
Cool. Appreciate the insights, and it makes sense. It's also nice to hear that you have it on the radar and it's something that you value. But I understand your kind of, let's say, go-to-market approach. Iterate fast, iterate quick, and therefore you need to have an agile setup, let's say. It makes sense. We talked about it briefly in the introduction. So Zircuit is a CK EVM. So we have compatibility to the Ethereum virtual machine, which we saw many projects basically picking or choosing that path because it's crucial for adoption based on the network effects of Ethereum. And also the Zircuit staking program was really successful, where you allowed for ETH and LSTs, but also LRTs. I like the strategic approach a lot. And then recently, as you outlined, you launched mainnet phase 1 with the developer mainnet alongside the ZRC token. Congrats for that. Let's talk a little bit tokenomics, because this is also something that is really discussed frequently in our space. Maybe you could give us some insights on how Zircuit designed its economic model to ensure long-term sustainability and also to align incentives across all of the different stakeholders that you may have. And also maybe you can elaborate on are there any incentives basically to migrate the liquidity that you currently have from the current setup to the actual rollup? Okay.
So I will not be commenting on token questions, but I will be describing what we have done so far. So roughly, in March of 2024, we have launched the staking program on Ethereum mainnet. That program essentially had the form of a smart contract where users were able to deposit their LSTs, LRTs, and also native Ether, right? And these funds, they were not locked in the smart contract. They were withdrawable at any point. But this liquidity that exists still in that smart contract on L1, it's liquidity that is pre-committed to entering our ecosystem of projects and DeFi on L2. So, when we launched our mainnet in that very hidden partners only mode, we, gave the partners the opportunity to create projects and deploy them on Circuit. Then we launched mainnet phase one, where we admit that we are a fairly new project, right? And we kind of want to demonstrate to the world that we are very much capable of operating something like a mainnet, not only a testnet, and do so responsibly without, any huge downtime. And we have put some restrictions on the amount of liquidity that can enter the Circuit ecosystem. So currently, as of today, we have just raised these limits. So every single address during the very first days of the mainnet phase one, it was able to deposit up to 1 ETH of assets or of ETH onto Circuit mainnet. Today we have raised that limit to 50 ETH. So that sort of caps the amount of assets that can enter. Simultaneously with that, we are actually integrating with all these partners, with all these LST and LRT projects, so that they can actually natively exist on Zircuit. When this is done, we are going to lift all the caps. We are going to collect agreement signatures from all the stakers who would like to get that liquidity migrated from that smart contract on L1 onto Zircuit. So yes, there is definitely a plan. There is already a website UI for that. So, if you go to stake.zircuit.com, you will be able to navigate to it, and you will be able to sign a transaction, or not actually a transaction, just a message that says, yes, I want my tokens migrated. What I think we have done pretty well is we actually equipped that contract with the functionality that allows gasless migration. So for all those users who say, yes, I would, like my LSTs and LRTs to be bridged over onto Zircuit, we will be able to, having those signatures, do that gaslessly for them. So when we enter that next phase without any restrictions, which should be in the order of weeks, honestly, we are going to take those assets from the staking contract and bridge them over to Zircuit. The staking contract, it currently holds, roughly $2 billion in some various ETH assets or ETH type assets. Again, we are talking about LSTs and LRTs. So that's the amount of liquidity that will then show up on Zircuit. And we will further work with the partners, with the DeFi protocols on Zircuit and any other projects deployed on Zircuit for actually getting that liquidity from something that we call central liquidity pool into those respective protocols. Again, with the agreement of the users. So yes, there are plans for migrating this over.
Okay, that sounds good. And it's cool to see that you very early on you already try to populate your rollup with a lot of liquidity, which kind of also leads up to my next topic. I want to briefly discuss maybe are there any updates, strategic partnerships, or milestones that you can disclose? Something also, especially regarding like who is building within the Circuit ecosystem already, like thinking about decentralized applications. Is there something exciting that you can share with us? And maybe also like what integrations do you see as crucial for Circuit's growth? Maybe you have some alpha on that front for us.
So I do, and I will not say it out loud. What I will say out loud is that we do have an ecosystem section on our website, and all these projects are, listed in there. All of them are very exciting to me, but at the same time, I am an individual with personal opinions, and by mentioning some, I could kind of do harm to the others that I do not mention. So I will not say any names. If you would like to, go to zircuit.com and you will be, again, able to navigate to the section with our ecosystem, with all the partners and all the exciting projects who are building on us and deploying onto Zircuit listed in there.
Very nice. And also fair take. We will definitely link to this kind of to this website and that specific section in the show notes. One more, and I swear it's the last more polarizing question for today. So before we wrap up, in your view, Martin, are rollups parasitic to Ethereum or not?
In my view, rollups are not parasitic to Ethereum. We all know that Ethereum has a problem with scaling, right? The transaction throughput on Ethereum mainnet is limited. And the Ethereum community knows that, right? The scaling solutions and various designs for scaling on Ethereum, ranging from plasmas over state channels to rollups and side chains and all that, they are, very, very, very old, right? We are still looking, back to 2017 and maybe even, earlier days. So Ethereum is very well aware of this drawback. I don't even want to say shortcoming, right? It's a
Yeah,
drawback of the technology. So and we do have justifications that are showing up all over. So for example, EIP 4844. If Ethereum perceived rollups as parasitic, obviously 4844, which is, pretty much created for rollups so that, they
for
can
sure.
record their data, it would never make it into the Dencun hard fork, right? So, or update. So, rollups are not, in my view, parasitic to Ethereum. Obviously, they do create some level of fragmentation, but this level of fragmentation, I think that it actually, would exist no matter what, right? If you didn't have rollups that are actually contributing to Ethereum, they are providing a service, they are scaling, they are introducing new features, you would just have different chains. You have BNB chain, you have Bitcoin, you have Solana, you have whole number of blockchains. So this fragmentation would be just happening just on a different level. So I
Yeah.
would say, it's not like a Ethereum versus rollups kind of problem, if problem at all. It's just an aspect of the space that exists. What I think we need is, very good user experience layer, right? Which is up to the builders of the applications, up to the builders of the wallets that will sort of abstract all of that away. So, in some way for the user in the future, it should be possible for them to be oblivious to the fact whether they are transacting on Solana, on Ethereum,
Yeah.
on Zircuit, on Optimism, or some other blockchain. What user wants to see is, hey, I have some assets here on blockchain, in this abstract way, on blockchain, and I want to move them somewhere. And I think that the user experience layer, should actually be able to provide this type of experience. We do have, various mechanisms that can be employed in here. It can be intense. It can be, inter-blockchain communication type things. So I think that this problem is solvable and will be solved from that angle. But in no way I consider rollups parasitic.
Yeah, cool. I think I'm on the same page as you. Like, also I feel rollups kind of solidified the EVM network effects and the Ethereum's overall kind of mind share and so forth. It's nice to see, and as you outlined, Ethereum itself would not be able to scale as it does without rollups, at least for the time being. Let's see how the future roadmap looks like. And obviously, there are no solutions without any trade-offs. So it's just the pill we have to swallow, that we deal with some more fragmentation. We had it before with isolated L1 ecosystems. It's maybe even better, since now we have kind of a trustless bridge in between, right? And then we have these value capture discussions, but this is also something that if we look on a very, very large scale and really go for this, like we want to basically have everybody on this earth at some point transacting on a distributed system. I think it's a problem that will solve itself. Yeah.
We are
Okay,
both
so
hopeful.
yeah, for sure, always, always optimistic, right?
Yes. With
Yeah.
zero knowledge about the future.
Yes, yes. By the way, on L2 beat, I also saw you can also filter for the different stacks when it comes to activity, and the OP stack currently has the highest growth rate. Just fun fact as we
Pretty cool.
come to the end. So as we wrap up, thanks Martin. It was really great. We learned that there's a new kit on the Rollup block, let's say, which offers another cool and exciting approach to security and sequencing. It has been a super insightful journey through the world of Zircuit. And I think it's really exciting to see what you're trying to do with combining AI and CK proofs within a rollup. As you really try to push the boundaries and see what's possible. As we outlined, it's a thin line, but I'm sure you managed to stay or to not cross something bad. So on behalf of Bitcoin Swiss and our audience, thanks for sharing your time with us and expertise. I think it was really enlightening. It was a fruitful, open, and very honest discussion, I feel. To our viewers, if you want to dive deeper into Zircuit, check out their website and social media channels. We will provide all the links in the show notes. Yeah, Martin, thank you for joining us.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dominic. It was my pleasure being here.
Cool. So until next time, this was Uncut Gems. Keep exploring the cutting edge of crypto innovation and see you next time.